Time for another top 10 video. Top 10 of 1986, my personal favorite. Of course, all opinions, no need to get upset about it. Let me know what your top 10 is in the comments below. Now let's go over mine, and just to lay out the rules here, what this video is all about. Not only am I going to give you 10, but I'm also going to give you a few honorable mentions, some dishonorable mentions, the movies that I thought were absolute garbage, not worth your time, and what I call participation trophies, just movies that were middle of the road, like okay, or just couldn't make my top 10 or my honorable mentions because I limit myself to how many honorable mentions I can give out. So that's how this will go. So I'm going to talk about quite a few movies here. So let's get into it. Let's start with the bottom 5. I watched over 50 movies for 1986, and one of them I didn't even consider horror, so I left it off, and one of them wasn't even really a movie. It was like 6 other movies that already existed in their so-called movie, so I just left that one off. It's called Zombathon. Just don't watch it. So yeah, let's get into the bottom 5. Number 1 of the 5 dishonorable mentions will be a movie called Girls' School Screamers. This is a movie that was released by Troma, and it is a slow, boring, anticlimactic, just mess of a production. The whole opening of this movie is one of those openings where later on you're like, oh, they just added that in at the last second because they're like, we need something interesting to open this movie up with. And it never plays into the story at all. And they cut back to that boy character later on, and it makes no sense. And once again, it's just something they threw in. The whole plot of like this ghost uncle who wants to marry this chick because she reminds him of someone else. It's a dumb plot, and like this girl, the final girl, ends up being possessed by the girl that he thinks she is. It's just, the ending is just ridiculous and so stupid. The setting is good, and there's a couple of decent kills in here, like a meat cleaver right to the mouth. Thought that was okay, but nothing memorable. And the acting, of course, is just very bad across the board, especially from like the Mother Urban character. And who the hell calls their girlfriend Pal? We need to get out of here. Okay, Pal. Who calls their girlfriend that? Next up is a very weird movie that recently got a Blu-ray release, I think, and that is Vicious Lips. This is a just low-budget, very cheap-looking production film that just has no horror in it at all, really. It's just got a lot of music in it that's not good. It's like has weird music video, choppy editing. It's just jarring, very badly shot, like miniature effects. It's more of a sci-fi musical with a little bit of horror in it, with this guy who's like deformed in the spaceship with them. They just keep cutting back to him, and he's not scary or intimidating at all. And it's just, there's just a lot of songs in here padding the runtime. The best part was just these two naked, half-naked girls in the desert walking around with like their stage manager. Next up is a movie called Mutilations. This is ultra low budget garbage that's just laughably terrible due to its bad like stop motion effects and like composite shots. It just looks so ridiculous. It's only an hour long, thankfully, so it gets to the action quick, but on the negative side of that, we don't give a shit about these characters. There's one decent kill in here where a claw, an alien claw, stabs through this woman's back and out her stomach. But the way these aliens look and how that's all shot at the end, how they easily take them down, is just pathetic. It is kind of funny that they're like being chased by a UFO and it's like shooting laser beams at them, and they just stop real quick at a burger joint to eat. Yeah, the acting is what you would expect too. Just awful. Next up is another very, very low budget, like shot on video, I think, slasher movie called Terror at 10 Killer. This is a slasher where the kills are so super lame, it's unoriginal, it's not scary at all, takes itself very seriously, and the mystery is so piss poor. Like, they show you who the killer is almost instantly, but yet at the same time they're like trying to set up the boyfriend almost like a red herring, and then he comes in at the last second to do nothing, just to die off camera. And the music is fucking horrendous. The acting is garbage, of course, and the suspense is non-existent. It's incredibly boring and dialogue heavy. There's just over an hour of nothing, just two girls by themselves, and the girl's like, oh, my abusive boyfriend, he doesn't know where we are, even though he keeps leaving me messages on our voicemail, where at the beginning it says, hey, you reached so-and-so at this address, leave a message. He doesn't know where you are? Of course he knows where you are. Next up is another shot-on-video horror movie, slasher, mystery called Night Ripper. I had to watch this one on 1.75 speed to get through it, and even that didn't help it. It still somehow managed to be incredibly boring. Every kill in this movie is super lame, just stabs to the face, but the way it's shot and edited is just so laughable. There's no gore, but they keep talking about how she's disemboweling all her victims. I would have liked to see some of that, but no. There's no gore, there's no effects, there's no humor, there's no boobs, like nothing. I did like the aesthetic of like the creepy mannequin studio that they are at in the third act, how it's like very dark and there's just all these mannequins around, and how the killer gets taken out by one of the mannequins, how that was all set up. It was just, again, very laughable and silly. But that's the only positive I can give this movie. And the killer's motivation, again, just so laughable and stupid. So there you go. Those are the 5 worst movies. There's other ones I could have talked about, but I'm only going to talk about 5. So there you go. And shout out to Zombathon. That movie's fucking garbage too. It's not even a movie. So now let's go into my participation trophies, shall we? Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. The Freeling family move in with Diane's mother in an effort to escape the trauma and aftermath of Carol Ann's abduction by the Beast. Deadly Friend. Scientific whiz kid Paul moves to a new town to study artificial intelligence at the local university. When tragic events take both BB and Samantha from him, the boy genius desperately sets out to restore the love he lost. Dead Time Stories. A babysitting uncle tells his nephew 3 horror stories about a killer witch, Little Red Riding Hood, and Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Invaders from Mars. In this remake of the classic 50s sci-fi tale, a boy tries to stop an invasion of his town by aliens who take over the minds of his parents. Vamp. 2 fraternity pledges go to a sleazy bar looking for strippers to entertain their college friends, but find much more than they bargained for. Crawl Space. A man who runs an apartment building for women is the demented son of a Nazi surgeon who has the house equipped with secret passageways, hidden rooms, and torture and murder devices. Demons 2. A group of tenants and visitors are trapped in a 10-story high-rise apartment building infested with demons who proceed to hunt the dwindling humans down. The Wind. A mystery writer goes to Greece where a handyman has a role in her latest murder plot. Trick or Treat. When rock star Sammy Kerr is killed in a hotel fire, fan Eddie becomes the recipient of the only copy of Kerr's unreleased album, which, when played backwards, brings Sammy back to life. The Hitcher. While transporting a car from Chicago to San Diego, Jim Halsey picks up a hitchhiker named John Ryder, who claims to be a serial killer. After a daring escape, Jim hopes to never see Ryder again. Alright, top 10 everybody, let's get into it. This movie that we're going to start with is a movie that could have been higher up, but honestly, it's just not a movie I ever want to watch again. It's very just brutal and it's not rewatchable, and that's something I really look for in my movies. I want to watch it again and again, and this one is not one that you want to keep revisiting. And number 10 is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Now, I know this movie also had like a release in like 90 or 91, but originally it was released in 86, and that's what it says on Letterboxd, so I'm going with it. So let's just get that out of the way. It's 86. This movie was shot on 16mm, and I think it's just brilliantly directed. The actor here, Michael Rooker, I think he really just embodies his role. He looks and acts like a psychopath, and I think it's really gritty, and it's disgusting and vile, and it's just, like I said, it's not something that you want to keep revisiting, because it's disturbing. It's filled with a lot of like macabre imagery, incest, rape, and just the end shot is very chilling. And yeah, just like I said, a great performance by Michael Rooker. I can't stress it enough. And like I said, the only thing that hurts it is its rewatchability. Number 9 goes to Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So Tobe Hooper comes back to just make this balls out, just crazy, ridiculous tonal shift sequel. We got Caroline Williams and Dennis Hopper in here, and the scene where he's chainsaw shopping is my favorite scene in this movie. It's hilarious. You got Bill Moseley also as Chop Top, the iconic character, and I think he's funny, but also a little annoying at times, but nowhere near as irritating as the other character, the chef dude, the one who just seems like he's ad-libbing everything he says. Where's that fuck you Charlie at? I like that he gets a chainsaw up his asshole, so I think he deserved it. The writing doesn't really make much sense in this movie. Like the whole Dennis Hopper like setting her up, and he's like, "I used you, like for what?" None of that makes sense. None of how they're living down there and how they have electricity, how they brought all their victims down there, like all that stuff going on down there, how they're living there and no one's noticed that they're there. None of that makes sense. But it's an enjoyable, just crazy movie and good gore, Tom Savini gore, and it's not censored at all. It's not cut like some of these other movies I'll be talking about. Seems like Tom Savini always gets away with having gore in his movies. They never get censored. Friday the 13th, they just never do. Maniac, The Burning. And I do really appreciate that this one tried something different. They didn't do the sequel approach where they do the same thing. I like that Toby Hooper went in this direction and just said, fuck it, let's do what we want. Let's have a whole wall of guts spill out. It's just insane, and I appreciate that. And shout out to two users, Justin Smith and Will Fitz Horror, who said that this was their favorite horror movie of 1986. Number 8 is one of the better Ouija board movies out there, and that is Witchboard. I don't think this movie gets enough credit. I think it's actually well written. The characters, they have a lot of depth. I like their arc to get these two best friends who, aren't friends anymore because of love triangle, but then, they're working together, and I like the characters, like the dialogue. I think it's well acted enough. It's not terrific, acting, but it's good enough. And it's got a couple of brutal kills in it. They're unexpected too. Like the one of them, especially, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. I love how the story unfolds. But at the very end, I'm not crazy about how all that went down. I just wish it would have been shot a little better. There's like one bad shot in the movie. It's just there's a couple of little bad effects in the film. I like that it's kind of meta too. They even like talk about The Exorcist and his girlfriend's Linda, and he calls her Linda Blair. I like all that stuff. But even though the third act to me does slip off the rails a little bit, I still feel like, the ending is satisfying, so I'm okay with it. Next up is a killer robot movie called Chopping Mall. I like that this movie has like a slasher movie template, but has killer robots instead that are evil because of lightning. I like the unconventional, fearless final girl who, is a dead eye, and at first you think that she's just like the typical dorky version girl, but then she shows that she's actually a badass. So I like that. I like having Barbara Crampton in here also, and Garrett Graham from Child's Play 2, and another movie that I will be talking about later on. It has a really cool, catchy 80s synth score. Feels very 80s the whole movie, and really corny, fun dialogue. It even has a cameo from Dick Miller, and that's always good to see. It's always nice to see Dick Miller, and you also got the guy, I think his name was Todd or Scott or whatever, from Friday the 13th Part 2, so it was cool to see him. My only negative with the movie is the kills, though. I mean, it's kind of a slasher movie, but the only kill that's memorable in here, that's iconic, is the head explosion. Outside of that, everything else is pretty lame, off-camera stuff. Next up is from the director of Monster Squad, and that is Night of the Creeps. What I really like about this movie is its uniqueness. It's a genre blend, this amalgam of genres of like sci-fi, aliens, and just zombies, a slasher also. It's 50s horror, and it turns into 80s horror. It starts in the 50s, it's black and white. I just love how unique this movie is. There's not a whole lot of movies that I can name that are exactly like this. The other big thing I love about this movie is Tom Atkins. He is the star of the show, really. Him, and I like the other two main characters and just their rapport with each other, their dialogue, their back and forth. I really like him. JC, he's the wingman. I love them too, but also, of course, I love Tom motherfucking Atkins. He's amazing. He's got the stash, and the quotable lines of the film thrill me. The movie does cut away from the action a bit too much. There's always like something about to happen and it just cuts away, and then we'll see like the aftermath later on. So this one doesn't have a whole lot of gore. There's a little bit, you got some head explosions later on, but I wish they would have shown more on screen, more of these creeps attacking more people. They should have really, ramped up the action in the third act at the sorority house. There should have been a lot more, flamethrower action there. But unfortunately, it's just a little lackluster, if you ask me. And some of the writing doesn't make that much sense, especially like why they froze the guy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really hurt the film, but I do question how the best friend got infected, but also, even though he was dead, he like recorded a tape. I don't understand that. It's entertaining though, it's shot well, and it's got exploding heads, some gore, zombies, aliens, and Tom Atkins, so what's not to love? And shout out to two users, Joey Mert and K Joan. Those two said that this was their favorite of 1986. Number 5, from the creators of Reanimator, the next film they made the next year, is From Beyond. So Stuart Gordon and a lot of the same cast and crew came back a year later from Reanimator to give us this outstanding just effects extravaganza, just filled to the brim with creature effects, all kinds of unique creature designs and gore, and it's just a blast. Mac Alberg also comes back to do the cinematography, and I think the movie looks really good. There's a lot of vibrant colors. It just looks pretty. So I'm always a fan of pretty movies that like Suspiria, films that use like neon lights, and this one uses colorful lighting when they go into like this other dimension. I like the concept of the movie and the imagery that it creates. Just kind of makes you feel like you're on drugs because of that cinematography and just the whole concept and what they're seeing. It's trippy stuff. Bubba, played by Ken Foree, he's a great actor. I love him, and I think his character's great in here. He's my favorite character, who meets a grisly end. And you also got the lovely Barbara Crampton, who was also in Chopping Mall and Reanimator. I think the opening and finale of this movie are both just wonderful. I really enjoy it, and this movie features a penis-looking, just big old pineal gland protruding out of the actor's what's his face? Jeffrey Combs, his forehead, and he's just sucking the brains out of people's eye sockets. It's wonderful. I mean, yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, you gotta check it out. Next up is a movie that's highly regarded as a classic. Everybody adores it. It's a 10 out of 10 to a lot of people. I just saw it for the first time recently, so I can't put it too high. I don't have any nostalgia for it, but I do agree that it's a damn near flawless masterpiece, and that is David Cronenberg's The Fly. Cronenberg's direction in this movie is very good, and it has incredible body horror and gore effects in it that are just amazing. The performances by Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis are also incredible. As, especially Jeff Goldblum, who has to really play more than one character. He really changes throughout the film. He's acting in makeup, so I just think he really is impressive in the film. And the ending is very sad, and just the way the story unfolds, I think, is just perfect. It's a very intelligent script, not too many flaws with the movie. I just question why he got in the thing in the first place. It felt a little forced, like especially the relationship between him and Gina Davis. It felt a little rushed just for the story. I didn't see much of a connection between them in the beginning, and then the next second they're just having sex. But outside of that, the telepods look cool. It's very well shot, and I love the different approach they took rather than just do the whole instant head thing from the original. He slowly changes into a fly by the end of it. So that was a smart approach to this remake, and it is my number 4. And shout out to Charlie Rached, who said that this was his favorite of 1986. Next up is another movie I just saw for the first time. I did not grow up watching sci-fi movies. I never liked sci-fi. Still, I'm not crazy about sci-fi movies in general. And this is a sci-fi action horror movie by James Cameron, and that is Aliens. Just like Terminator 1 to 2, this sequel by James Cameron takes the double the action and double the threat approach, where it's bigger and badder. I think the special effects on the aliens and the set designs are magnificent and very impressive. I love that they're keeping with the continuity. They're bringing back Ripley into this one, and now she's kind of playing like the a motherly role, protecting Newt. And she's a badass, strong female lead, and she just kicks ass towards the end. Like, get away from her, you bitch. Like, when she gets in that big old thing, that thing that's from, like, Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's in that video game, I swear to God. They probably took it from this movie. But that's where I recognized it. The cast is really good, and you got a lot of familiar faces. Bill Paxton, all these other actors from other James Cameron films. So it was nice to see them here. It's a riveting, high-octane action horror film that never gets dry or boring. Even though it's 2.5 hours long, it doesn't even really feel like it. Some visual effects might not age that well, especially with Blu-ray. Some shots might not look that great. And the character Hudson got a little annoying to me, but doesn't hurt the film. It's still overall just a big budget, just popcorn flick that you can enjoy any time of the year. So Aliens easily is my number 3. And shout out to 2 users, Chongo Chalupa and Guadalupe Martinez, who chose this as their number 1. All right, next up, number 2. This is a movie that I'm gonna have to defend myself for putting up so high, but at the end of the day, I'm choosing movies that I've seen multiple times and movies that are highly entertaining and rewatchable and are just my style of film. And this movie I'm talking about is Terror Vision. This is a movie that is not for everyone, but to me, this movie is amazingly outrageous and over the top. The set designs in this film are like flashy and vivid. There's just like pornographic cartoons everywhere. It's like these swingers with this little kid, and he's like really into guns and grenades, and the grandpa's like a conspiracy theorist, like doomsday guy, like the world's about to end, so he's got like a bunker. And it's just every character is over the top, but they play it well. They don't, even though it's very over the top, it doesn't go too over the top where I start to roll my eyes or I just think it's too damn silly where it's not landing. Like everything lands for me. Like that's why it works. Like there's movies that are stupid silly, and then there's movies that are just stupid, and or they don't succeed in actually being funny. This one succeeds in being stupid silly, where they know what they're doing. They're purposely hamming up the performances. You got Diane Franklin, who's gorgeous. I love her. I love Garrett Graham from Child's Play 2 and Chopping Mall for a brief moment. Just great characters, very memorable, very over the top, and the theme song is very catchy, and I love it. I think it's from Richard Band. And the creature effects by John Carl Buechler, who's done all kinds of movies that I love. His creature in this movie is both silly looking, but also kind of terrifying. If I saw this thing in real life, I would run away. I love the look of it, just how slimy it is. It's unique looking. There's nothing else like it. I love the look of this monster in it. I wish the deaths in this movie would have been more graphic. For some reason, when people die in the movie, they have like green blood. Instead, they just kind of shrivel up and shit. I wish they would have made it a little bit more graphic, but to me, it's damn near perfect as a comedy horror. This is very much comedy, not very much horror. It's just there's an alien, and that's all the horror there is in it. But it's hilarious. The cheesy humor cracks me up every time I watch it. And it's not for everyone, but if you love comedy horror, you like over the top silly shit, check out this movie. It's a blast. Now, before we get to my number 1, let's go over 5 honorable mentions as quickly as I can. Don't want to keep you waiting too long to find out what my number 1 is. So number 15 is a movie to me that is very nostalgic. It's one of the first VHSs I ever owned, and I've already reviewed it on this channel in the whole series, and that is Critters. Why this movie couldn't go very high up is because, as I get older, this movie just doesn't really appeal to me as much. Some things about it don't age very well. This is more of a tame family horror movie, kind of like a Gremlins or something like that, or Poltergeist, but it's just nowhere near as well made as those two movies. It's lower budget than those two. But I think the critter effects by the Chiodo brothers, who would go on to do Killer Clowns from Outer Space, are actually pretty good. And it's silly, but just it's not horror enough. I wish there would have been darker things happening in it. Some deaths on screen. It's all off-camera stuff. There's not a lot of effects in it, but the transformation sequence of like the guy's head changing, that effect actually looks pretty good. I like the family chemistry. It feels like a real family. I like the way they're set up. You got Scott Grimes, who would later be an American Dad, and so yeah, I like the small town setting also. I always like a small town setting. And I like the bounty hunter characters also, but I feel like in this movie, they don't utilize them that well. Like they do more damage than good, and they only kill like maybe one of the 7-8 critters, and the family kills the rest of them. So the bounty hunters don't really do a whole lot in this one. They do a lot more in part 2. Next up is the sequel directed by the guy who's in the movie playing the titular character, the psycho himself, Anthony Perkins. This movie is, of course, Psycho 3. I like that this is the more slasher film of this franchise. It's sleazy, and it's got, more kills in it, and it's got one of the best characters in the franchise with Duke. Hey, watch the guitar. Perkins does a good job directing, but I just feel like because he's directing, maybe hurt his acting, because the way he plays his character in this movie compared to part two, it seems like it's slipping a little bit. He just kind of isn't as good in some scenes, and I feel like this movie does a little too many callbacks to part one. It just feels a little forced at times, and I'm not a fan of the religious stuff that they throw in here. The whole character of what's her face, I don't find that character interesting at all, and it ultimately just it goes nowhere. I do like that we get to see Norman talking to his mom, and we get to see him talking as mom, and I thought that was really creepy. Next honorable mention will be Slaughter High. This is one of 3 April Fool's movies to come out this year, and I think it's a perfect title for this cheese fest of a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, thankfully. I like the score by Harry Manfredini. He even uses some of his Friday the 13th cues, and there's a Jason Voorhees little joke in here. It's kind of meta. It's got the traditional slasher movie premise where there's a prank gone wrong, like a terror train, or, just that typical, like, prank gone wrong scenario. It's here also. The characters overall aren't really all that great. They're just assholes who are deserving of their grisly demises because of the shit that they pull in the opening and because of their asinine, stupid decisions that they do later on. When shit hits the fan, they just go take baths and shit. Makes no sense. And then the ending, I'm not really a fan of. It's this cop-out ending where it's like, oh, it's all just, a dream. But it's like, what? But is it a dream? I don't know. I feel like you could interpret it 2 ways. Maybe he's just having memories of what actually happened, but then at the end it turns into a dream. I don't know, but I'm not a fan of that. The final chase sequence goes on way too long. They need to trim that down, and they actually made it that long to pad the runtime. And when you're watching it, it makes sense. That's exactly what I thought the first time I watched it. This is padding the runtime. The final chase was way too long. There's just character decisions that don't make any sense, but I do love the kills. Got some creative kills, some gore, like the simple premise, and it's a holiday themed slasher, so you can watch it once a year. And I like the mask that the guy wears. Next up is another April Fool's movie by the director of Funeral Home, and that is Killer Party. This also was written by the writer of Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, one of the best slasher movies ever made. And this one could have been one of the best slasher movies ever made had the kills actually stayed within the movie, but they were all cut out of the movie and were lost, damaged, just forgotten about. They're gone. So it's never going to come back. This movie doesn't even have a Blu-ray release yet. It needs one. But the characters in this movie are actually great. The dialogue, it's just silly. I love how this movie is like 2 different genres. It just switches genres at a random point. This movie also features one of the most bizarre and unique horror movie openings just ever. It's like a movie within a music video, and it's just hilarious, and I love it. Next up is the last and final April Fool's Day movie of 1986, and that is April Fool's Day. This movie lives up to its title, and it is perfect to watch annually on April Fool's Day, and I can't really see myself watching it on any other day, really. The writing of this movie is a bit convenient at times, because, of things revealed later on. When you look back, there's just some things that are very convenient, and also the end plan at the end, like when what's revealed, that whole thing is just, to me, asinine. It's just, that would never work or happen. The kills in this movie should have somehow been more on screen or gory or creative, just something unique, something that's memorable, but unfortunately it's just a bunch of cutaway, goreless kills. You got some decapitated heads, but it's all off-camera stuff, so that's a shame. They even teased nudity by this one girl from Just One of the Guys. Awful. Don't tease me. Just, if you're not going to show it, don't show it, but don't tease me. This is really a comedy, and I think the comedy works. There's a lot of funny gags and pranks being pulled on each other in the first, 30 minutes. All that stuff is great. It's not a horror movie, really. The only scare in the film is a cat scare. But the cast is amazing. You got a lot of familiar faces. You got the bully from Back to the Future. You got 2 people from Just One of the Guys. The guy from Summer School and Leprechaun. Ginny from Friday the 13th Part 2. Just a terrific cast. Good actors. Some good performances. Funny, witty characters. So the characters are great. Dialogue's good. You even got Deborah Foreman. I forgot to mention her. And you got Charles Bernstein doing a score, and I really like the score. And Fred Walton directs this. He directed When a Stranger Calls. This is a good movie, and it has the best poster, like one of the best posters from the 1980s. All right, the time is here. No more honorable mentions. My number one. I think you've seen it coming. Process of elimination. What's my number one? It is Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. Once again, another Jason movie is my number one. These movies so far have all been in my top five. Three of them now, my number one. Two of them were in my top five. I won't say which ones in case you haven't seen those rankings yet, but this franchise is very nostalgic to me. It's one of my favorite horror franchises. This franchise and Child's Play, I grew up with these. I adore them. And this one to me is one of the more better directed sequels, better written ones. Tom McLaughlin, I really like, what he did, and it's got a lot of good humor in it. It's meta. Some of the humor does hurt the film. I do not like the face that somehow makes a smiley face. Like, that's a little too far, and I don't like the kids. Oh, we're dead meat. Like, I wish they would have gotten rid of they should have stripped the comedy more out in the third act. Like, when you got towards the third act and Jason's fucking shit up at the camp, it should have gotten a little bit more serious. I think this is one of the more better paced sequels and entries in this franchise, and it gets going real fast. I love the gothic horror atmosphere, the cemetery setting in the open, the resurrection of Jason. I love that he brought back Tommy Jarvis, and I really like his relationship with Megan and just their mission at the end, just driving down the road. This one actually has like stunts and car chases, so this one just feels bigger budget than the other ones, just more professionally made than some of the other sequels. They finally bring kids to the damn camp finally, so it actually feels like a summer camp for once, and it raises the stakes. On the first viewing, you're like, is Jason gonna kill a kid? I personally would have liked to have seen that, but it's just not gonna happen, I guess. I guess he identifies with him. He died as a kid technically, so he sees himself in them, I guess. He doesn't want to kill children, whatever, but it would have been nice to see him kill those two punks underneath the bed. But the characters overall are memorable, well acted, and the score by Harry Manfredini is a bit updated, but still very Friday the 13th. Still carries that Friday the 13th feel, and also the ending is very intense on the boat out there and poetic, just bringing Jason back to his final resting place where he originally died back in the 50s. I like that. I just like the way it wrapped up. This is where the franchise should have ended, really. This was good. 7, 8. I don't like them. Now, shout out to a bunch of people here that chose this as their number one. I got quite a few people here. Users, Jason, Markham, or Markham, whatever, however you pronounce it. I'm gonna butcher some names here, maybe. So, Jerry Gamer, Diamond Vibes 27, and Scotty Boy Rules, Liam 03, and also Sassy Pants G. So, a lot of people chose this movie as their number one. Understandably so. It's one of the better entries of the franchise. A lot of people love it. I love it, and it's my number one. And just very quickly, before I get out of your hair, before I end this video, I'm going to let you know what else I watched. Because sometimes I get that occasional comment that's like, well, did you watch this movie from 1986? I didn't see it on your list. Well, I watched also, these are the movies that did not make my list at all. Troll, Nightmare Weekend, which I actually kind of recommend because it's so fucking stupid that it's actually kind of entertaining. Check that out. Dead End Drive-In, I didn't think that was much horror. It's kind of horror, I don't know. Truth or Dare, and The Zero Boys, Neon Maniacs, Class of Nukem High, Bloodhook, Body Count, Maximum Overdrive, The Nomads, Sorority House Massacre, Gothic, Dreamaniac, The 11th Commandment, Rawhead Rex, The Supernaturals, Spookies, everybody knows Spookies, right? And Little Shop of Horrors, a musical. Yeah, that was not going to make my list. In case you don't know, I fucking hate musicals. So, that was never going to make my list. That was towards the bottom. But I can't deny that it's a well-made movie. I can't stand musicals. So, yeah, those are all the movies I watched from 1986. The Wraith, also, with Charlie Sheen. That one didn't seem horror to me at all. It just seemed like a kind of sci-fi, supernatural, revenge, car racing movies. It wasn't really horror, so yeah, I saw a bunch of movies from 1986. What's your top 10? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And until next time, Auf Wiedersehen.